There's a sign on the highway. There's a fork in the road. A lifetime of lessons learned don't mean nothing, it shows. Armchair doctor, experts making all the rules, selling us their theories while they take us all for fools. And there's nowhere left to hide on that freedom road. Don't tell me what to think, don't tell me how to live on that freedom road. Get your hand out of my pocket, I got no more to give, I got no more to give. There's a cop in the distance behind a big box tree. There's a crime being committed somewhere, but the radar gun's on me. A quiet quarter afternoon, I'm doing 105. Like a fat kid on a seesaw, all tilted to one side. And there's nowhere left to hide, and no one's putting up a fight on that freedom road. Don't tell me what to think, don't tell me how to live on that freedom road. Get your hand out of my pocket, I got no more to give, I got no more to give. Clipboard, he's just out of school. He tells me that I'm doing wrong, something he could never do. Writing in a textbook ain't no substitute for life. The rules and regulations, they're just dumbing down our minds. And there's nowhere left to hide, and no one's putting up a fight. They're all just waiting around to die on that freedom road. Don't tell me what to think, don't tell me how to live on that freedom road. Get your hand out of my pocket, I got no more to give on that freedom. Hand out of my pocket, I got no more to give, I got no more to give.
And here we are in Perth again, and just bringing in our guest today, Dr. Mark Lofts, who I met at Collins the other day. We did a brief interview, and I invited you on. Dr. Paul Oosterhuis might join us. We're in Perth, he's in Sydney, so he's like 3 months ahead of us. But yeah. So first off, how are you, and how as a retired doctor, what are your thoughts on what's happening to the country now with the fuel? We just saw $3.11 as we came up here for diesel, and we saw a garage that had no diesel.
That's right. That's what we've got now. I'm very well personally, but everybody is doing very poorly. And your introductory song spelled it out fully. The doctors are corrupt and the standard of living is going to fall because of inflating price rises everywhere.
You think
So,
you think what we're looking at now is what happened with COVID? Like this basically went around the world. It appears that it was orchestrated, and now here we are again. And because without fuel, everything is in fuel. It's in our clothes, it's in our cars, it's in the plastic we wrap stuff in. It's everything. Do you think this is just
that's
an
right.
accident, or we're actually looking at a next phase heading to this 2030 agenda?
Yes, we are. We're heading to this 2030 agenda, and it's been coming on for a much longer time, over 100 years, but has been very bad since 2019. I only really became aware of it when I just happened to be listening to a record that I'd had from a long time ago, a piece of music by a person called Louis Vierne, who was an organist at Notre Dame Cathedral. And I've been reading about him and found that he trained at another cathedral called Saint-Sulpice, which I was vaguely aware of from my studies on Gnosticism. Anyway, within 48 hours, that was in March 2019, Saint-Sulpice Cathedral was badly burnt by fire.
Yeah.
And that meant nothing to me at the time. But a month later, Notre Dame Cathedral burnt down. And that's when I knew that the burning of both cathedrals was deliberate and that there was a big agenda which was just about to be tipped upon us. But I had no idea what it was. So that when in July of 2019, I visited the USA and met with Joseph Atwill, he's the author of the famous book, Caesar's Messiah, we were talking about what it could mean. But because of my medical background, it blinded me to the fact that what was coming was COVID, even though they were starting to talk about it then. So I didn't realise until November of 2019, when I myself got whatever this vicious version of COVID was when it was released, but I only realised in November of 2019 that this COVID was the scam, because I knew that flus are not treated with vaccines, and it was only because. Right. And it was only because
before you go on, Doc, could you just give us for those who aren't aware, why is it that you can't vaccinate against a flu?
Because flus come in many different kinds. They also undergo great mutation, and also because vaccination itself is very dangerous. What you do, you introduce aluminium, a little bit of mercury, and a lot of other compounds which stimulate an immune response. And when you stimulate an immune response, you're hoping you're going to have an immune response to the particular antigen, the particular part of whatever organism you're trying to create immunity to. But the problem is that when you do it, you also create immune reactions towards your own bodily tissues. And this is the real horror, and is the reason why vaccination has only very little recommendation, or even none at all, according to Judy Wileman. The problem here is that when you induce autoimmunity, you make autoimmune reaction to your own antigens, your own body. And this gives rise to a whole host of diseases called autoimmune diseases. These diseases include rheumatoid arthritis, lupus erythematosus, where you actually get antibodies to your own DNA, others like scleroderma, celiac disease, mixed connective tissue disease. While these diseases are rare in the community, when you add them all together, they are common, and they have become increasingly common for over 60 years. And when I was a medical student in 1976, when I was just starting out at hospitals learning about medicine, everyone was talking about the fact that autoimmune diseases were becoming rarer. Thus, 9 years later, when I was working at Royal Perth Hospital, I decided I wanted to be an immunologist. I started immersing myself in this subject in greater detail. And while I was there, it occurred to me that the reason we're getting increasing autoimmune diseases, there must be some underlying cause. And it finally occurred to me that the one thing we're giving people more and more of is vaccines. And I remember speaking to the young immunologist there. He was 8-9 years older than me. I told him about my hypothesis, which would solve a whole lot of autoimmune problems if it were true. And he told me, and very clearly so, he said, Mark, what you've suggested there is absolutely wrong. He told me that vaccines have been thoroughly tested and they've been found to be entirely safe, so that I don't have to worry about any connection and issues such as that whatsoever. And I remain blind to the danger of vaccines until I read Joseph Atwell's book, Caesar's Messiah, which of course is dealing with a different subject. But then I went on to his podcasts, and he described having 2 children, and each of those children had children of their own. And of each of them, one of the children had had autism. And the GPs told his children, his son and daughter, that they had a hereditary disease. So the GPs were telling people that autism was a hereditary disease, despite the fact that it had not been described until 1938. And wow. Joseph Atwell, who was not a doctor, then realised that something dirty is going on here. And because he insisted on it, because he produced evidence, he mentioned about Dr. Andrew Wakefield, who I'd vaguely heard of, and I'd basically gotten the impression he was a bit of a criminal. Then I found it wasn't so, because Andrew Wakefield, who was a surgical trainee in Britain, he had taken histories from mothers who said that the autism only came on within hours or days after getting the jab, and that the child was never the same. And all that evidence has been suppressed by Britain's College of Surgeons, and he was thrown out of his training program. It was only after reading things like that that I realised that I had been misled back in 1986, and that I had merely presumed that vaccines were safe. And it took me until, 2017 to start to wake up. And so...
what is it like waking up to know that the people you looked up to have been either lying to you, or they were passing on the lie that they believed, and that somewhere down the track or backwards, no one had done these studies? And that should have been, you should have been able to find out the studies weren't done. But do you really think it was just trust? We trusted those above us.
That's right. We all trusted those. The person who told me, the young immunologist, I call him Dr. Harry Bollocksworth, but that's not his real name. But he came first in the year in Anglican school in WA. He was also the school captain, which made everyone who knew him think he was an honest and reliable person. That's why I trusted what he said, because I wouldn't have thought that he'd have been someone misled. He was also a Rhodes Scholar, went to Oxford University, and I didn't think of it till 2017 that I'd been lied to. In fact, I even had to think more carefully of what I'd said. I'd almost forgotten my own ideas back in 1986. And you're going to ask me whether he was deliberately lying or he just believed the BS he was told by his seniors.
That's exactly right. That is my question, yeah.
Yeah, that's hard. I don't want to say who the head of the department was, but he's got relatives who are politicians and evolutionists, etc. So it was a big name in his field. And while he was terribly prejudiced, I tended to think that Dr. Bollocksworth got his ideas elsewhere. And when I think about it, I think he was consciously lying to me, because I'd have thought he was a person too intelligent to know to be fooled like that. So I find it very hard to say, and perhaps he's innocent and misled. Well, he's still alive. He'd be 79 now, and I hope that he listened to this podcast and realised the big mistake he'd made in life.
Do you think, though, to be honest, like maybe he did believe it because those who was claiming it had been tested upon, and the tests were fraudulent, or they didn't really do them, that there's the lie, and yet it's marketed to those believe it. And the reason someone even of his stature, a Rhodes Scholar, would believe it is that they couldn't conceive that a corporation, which is what Big Pharma is, could put out something that was dangerous to children. It's
That's right.
inconceivable. So
Yeah.
that's why they trusted them, because they
It,
couldn't believe that they could do something so hideous.
That's right. You'd think there was an ethical committee there, but
Yeah.
you'd also think that being an immunologist himself, he would have had a look at some of these studies, but he may have just accepted what he was told. See, when I was a medical student back in 1976, 77, my tutor, one of the first things he said, he was always getting very elderly people in, very sick, because their GPs, their general practitioners, had put them on incompatible medications, and they'd become very sick. They'd be admitted to hospital. This was Lidcombe Hospital when it was a teaching hospital. Then my tutor would take the patient off all the drugs, and the patient would get better in 3 or 4 days. And he'd only put the drugs back on as they were particularly needed. Then he'd advise the GP. Then the patient would come back about 4 months later. And this with the same problem. And it became a recurring problem. He became very well known. You might have heard of the Tom Gibeon Prize at Bankstown Hospital. That's named after him because he was a very good tutor. But the difference was that I was a very bad student. I didn't want to do medicine, and I need to be very clear about that because I have a bit of a story for you later on.
Sure. Why did you not want to do medicine? What was the thing about you not wanting to do medicine since you became a doctor?
To be honest, I was about 4 or 5, and my parents took me to our local GP, Dr Crowther, at White's Corner and Liverpool Road in Strathfield, and I wanted to go and play and had to sit in the waiting room for 3 hours, and my father and mother were trying to say, would you like the idea of being a doctor? And I thought, what a dreadful thing to be, just all these patients in the waiting room, and then going in to see a doctor and having to talk to you or take blood tests or something. I thought it was the worst job you could ever do. But I did well academically, so I ended up doing medicine, but my heart really wasn't in it, unlike the other 2 doctors, B1 and B2, that I'd like to tell you about.
Yeah, sure. Before we get there, you went into research?
No, I didn't. I just wanted to get into training, but I couldn't get the training I wanted. So eventually, when I got to Royal Perth Hospital, I chose to do immunology, even though people had warned me that the department itself was terrible. So I regarded my dislike of the department later as merely due to the head of the department there. I didn't realise there was a wider agenda of corruption, and that was my problem, and I didn't realise that for over 30 years. So I just felt depressed at medicine.
In those 30 years, though, you would have seen the rise of autoimmune diseases.
That's right. They were already rising when I was a medical student in the 70s, but everyone was well aware that they were continuing to rise in the intermediate time. But I just thought that the medicos were honest, but just a bit dumb. But after what I'd experienced in that particular department, I wanted to get out of medicine. I said I did a bit of general practice for a while, but finally in 1995, I gave up doing medicine because I realised that our whole world was headed for disaster because the people who run the world were totally corrupt. But I didn't realise that this extended deeply into medicine through Big Pharma, even though my tutor, Tom Gibeon, had told us all that Big Pharma would gradually grow in power over the coming decades. And he didn't like that.
Wow, told you that. Yeah. Because it has to feed itself, doesn't it? I mean, it's the economy of a big pharma corporation is the equivalent of Poland or Sweden's economy. So it has to sustain itself, and it can only sustain itself if people are sick.
That's right. And the real problem, of course, is the global market. Everybody in the world buying goods is finite. And our economy is based on the idea that the global market and the surroundings we live in are infinite. That's why we have things like compound interest, so that when someone borrows money, they can never, ever earn enough to pay whatever they borrow, because compound interest is something that really drains the debtor's resources to pay off. And thus we're in a system that will ultimately only fail because of the increasing debts imposed upon us over the world.
Well, yeah, we owe $1 trillion now, and I think you'd struggle to find us to know who we actually owe $1 million to.
That's right. Each and every person owes about $100,000 or $200,000, and this is going to rise continuously and exponentially over not just the far future, the near future. I mean, we can see the crisis in the Middle East is directly connected to the issue of debt, as I think you're probably well aware now.
Yeah, that's right. Let's get this story out the way, though. I'm fascinated by the story of B1 and B2.
Right. B1 and B2 were people who I knew in my medical year, and I have to disguise their names. B1, I call him B1 because I met him before I met B2. B1 was really enthusiastic about doing medicine, quite different to myself, and he academically did very well, and rightly so. B2 was also more interested in medicine than I was. He was of Jewish background, but he seemed very different to his brothers and sisters as far as I could see, as I'll tell you a bit more about him since he's the main subject. And B1 and B2 had met each other before they met me at the beginning of medical school in first year, and I always considered them better friends of each other than they were of me. Anyway, in our fourth year out, we got together and decided to travel to Townsville, where the hospitals are always very happy to have trainee medical students from interstate learning about tropical and other diseases. So we drove up in B1's car, and B2 brought along certain literature for us to read, and that was The Lord of the Rings, if you know about it.
Oh, wow.
That's right, the one they made the movie about in New Zealand. Now, what was very odd is that when I started reading the story of Lord of the Rings, when you look at the Shire and the Lord of the Rings, and Frodo Baggins travels all the way to the land of the elves. The elves and their spirituality reminded me of what people said of the Russians before the communist period. And while they're traveling eastward to land of Anduin, the land of the elves, they pass by a very forested area which were inhabited by these tree people called Ents. ENTS. And I was puzzled by what they were, but they sounded to me like Tacitus' description of Germans, men in body and limbs, but with the minds of children. So it just struck me as all very odd. And then Saruman the Grey, who's the intermediate character between Gandalf the White and the evil black one, Saruman the Grey struck me as being the Pope, both geographically on Middle Earth and the fact that he's grey, he's playing both sides at once. And as you know in the story, when Saruman's army is defeated, the Ents come down and invade his capital city and wipe it out.
Yeah, that's right.
Then we come to the land of Mordor. When you look at the land of Mordor, it's mountain girt, and you remember that Frodo and I can't remember his companion, well, they went to destroy the ring. They go through a very mountainous, dry country, and that quite obviously is Iran, just looking geographically at it. But when we were heading up there, this is 1977.
Sam was his name, Sam.
Sam, that's it. When Frodo and Sam went to destroy the ring, that this was 1977, before the Iranian Revolution. The Shah was still in power. So that later on made me realise that what we were getting from that book was propaganda, but I didn't realise it at the time.
Wow.
But now the very interesting story about B2. We were heading between Marlborough and Serena on the old road, you know, the old inland road before they made the proper highway. And B2 was sitting in the front. I was sitting in the back. We swapped because B1 liked doing all the driving. And B2 said to B1, they wanted to be really had the intent of being doctors. He said, what would you do if a 12-year-old girl came into your surgery and asked for contraceptives because she was going to have sex with a boyfriend anyway, but she wanted to make sure she didn't get pregnant? And the two of them totally disagreed. B1 said, well, what about the mother or child welfare? And B2 tries to exclude those two. And B1 said, well, it's a police matter because I'm doing something illegal. And the argument grew and grew and became very hostile. And I was thinking, whatever you do, don't ask me. I don't want to be a part of it. Luckily, neither of them turned to ask my opinion because I didn't have the brains to provide one, I must be honest. And the two of them start almost at hammer and tongs, and suddenly B1 who was driving just shut everything up. I mean, he had to concentrate on driving, and the two of them lost their friendship there and then. And so when
Oh my
we were late
Lord.
travelling around, they basically communicated through me. And B2 then was the victim of a cougar attack in Townsville. By cougar, I don't mean an escaped animal from a zoo. I mean a woman about 10 years older than him. And anyway, about a year later, he was telling me when he came back to Sydney that this cougar had come from Townsville to Sydney and was going to look him up. And I thought, well, that will teach him a lesson about problems in human relationships. So now I then went to WA. I haven't contacted them for many years. So now I move forward to the COVID period. And in the COVID period, I was thinking to myself, now what does B1 think, since I knew B1 would be some medical specialist? So I went to see him in early 2022, I think, and I gave him Judy Wileman's and my information. He hasn't called me back. So after that, I decided to think, well, I wonder what happened to B2, because remember B2 was Jewish. And anyway, it turned out when I looked up and typed in his name, I found that he'd been reprimanded by the medical board because he had a questionable a sexual assault on a woman in surgery, and he could only practice under supervision. I was so shocked at that, and I thought, well, I can't really ask for his help in COVID. It'll all backfire. So I really felt stuck after that doctors who'd been so committed or seem to be so end up in a way that they're just trapped in the system, or they end up being discarded by the system. So I couldn't do anything. It was a very unhappy story. But the importance of B2, and I don't include his brothers and sisters in this, so I don't know them well, that B2 had imbibed all this ideology of what I would call, well, what is commonly called the Frankfurt School. And I just show a picture of one of the books the Frankfurt School has. It's by Herbert Marcuse. It's called Eros and Civilization, published in 1955, the very year I was born. You don't have to read the cover. All you have to do is look at the lipstick on the front, because the lipstick says it all. It basically says that Herbert Marcuse said, based on Sigmund Freud's idea of infant sexuality, that we have to liberate infant sexuality. And he basically approves of paedophilia, child molestation. But he puts it in a form in the book. He puts it in a very academic form that ordinary readers wouldn't want to read, because it's a very tangled language. And because he's German, he knows French as well, he can make up English sentences which are very long, convoluted and confusing. So we've been manipulated by people like him, Herbert Marcuse, and the other members of the Frankfurt School, who are Max Horkheimer and Theodore Adorno. And unfortunately, this has corrupted our society very, very severely. I mean, it's probably common knowledge for everyone that people are marrying much less. They don't have children as much, and there's single mothers everywhere. And men who feel suicidal because they don't have a partner. And this corruption in our society has come about ever since Freud's time through the Frankfurt School. And this is part and parcel of what would later become the COVID scam, because the COVID scam is part and parcel of the elite agenda to wipe out most of the human population. And I imagine, I haven't seen all your, anywhere near all your podcasts, but I imagine people have discussed the Georgia Guidestones and the attempt to reduce human population to 500 million. And if you look at the Middle East now, you can see it coming.
Yeah, well, we're looking at it now. I mean, we showed a video recently of a farmer in England who's been paid by the government to destroy his crops rather than grow them. He's been paid more money to wipe them out, to just let them go to rot.
And that's been happening in Canada. That's right. For the last 4 years, that's been happening in Canada.
And it's happening in America too. The farmers there have been paid more. So the manufacturing, or it would appear, allegedly, that they're manufacturing a famine.
That's right. They're manufacturing a famine, basically disaster everywhere, and they'll blame it on whoever they like. They'll blame it on China or Iran or Saudi Arabia, anybody. They'll make up any story that seems half plausible. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have honest people at the top, because if you
Or
have
but
someone
blame it on us right wingers. I mean, you're a
that's
right
right.
winger now.
Yeah.
Growing
That's
up, did you, when you were a doctor growing up, did you ever think I'm a right winger, or did you lean to the left, or weren't you bothered at all? But here you
Well,
are now, apprentice Nazi.
yeah. Well, when I was in my last year of medical school, I went out with this girl. She was also a medical student, and I thought she was a bit left wing for me. But when I broke with her 2 years later, at the end of my first year in medicine, I thought she was too right wing for me. So I actually was rather left wing, and I ended up joining a Marxist party for a while. But I was kicked out of
Wow.
that in 1994. But it enabled
Why
me
were
to
you
look
kicked
very
out?
carefully.
Why were you kicked out of a Marxist party?
Well, I was kicked out because I said we shouldn't be involved in a broad anti-fascist action in 1994 because it will be backed by the Zionists, and you people already know that Palestinians are being oppressed. But that wasn't good enough for them when I said that. I just got kicked out straight away because they hate anyone who looks a little bit right. So suddenly I found myself moving rightward. I joined the Greens for a while, but I found them quite incompetent.
Oh, really?
So yeah, well, they were pushing solar and wind, but they didn't seem to understand that solar and wind power, while necessary adjuncts, are not going to solve our energy problems. You might be able to do it in Australia by covering thousands of acres of land with solar collectors so that nothing will grow underneath them. But a country like Holland, solar and wind will never provide for Holland's needs. And we have to have something better than nuclear fission. And I'm trying to help the nuclear fusion research. There's a person called Eric Lerner, he's in New Jersey, and they're working on boron hydrogen fusion. And I hope to be able to contribute to that, but I don't want to direct the whole argument sideways into that issue.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing that we had the picture behind us. The picture behind us of the falls. The reason that's on is we have a gentleman coming on because they're going to cover all of that mountain range in turbines.
Oh my God!
So he's
disgusting.
Yeah, they're already doing it. They're already taking off the tops of all the mountains of. I think that's up at the Atherton Tablelands or a bit higher. So they're just taking all that down. Yeah,
that's right.
And here in Perth, here they're putting them in the ocean off the coast.
That's right. They're trying to put off Cape Lewin and further south off Scott River. And even the Greens used to know that where we have so many of our rare species in the Scott River area, and of course the Atherton Tablelands, which has also got a lot of rare species, which are a lot rarer because so much of the land has been cleared there. I mean, you go up there in the Atherton Tablelands, all you see is Indian miners on the side of the road, and they're certainly not native.
That's right.
Yeah.
No, that is correct. There's even this morning we were up late and we were actually watching Gardening Australia. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning because of something happened here, and they had a botanist on from WA. She was talking about the amount of rare plants in WA, the capturing or recording that are endemic to a very small area, sometimes only a few kilometers long. So that's all over Australia. We have these very, very rare species, and here we're just wiping them out for these turbines. The only thing they do is make the overseas corporations that own them rich while we pay the subsidies.
That's right. And in WA, our main coal area, as you probably know, is Collie. But the only two potential coal sources we have otherwise in the southwest are Mount Leger and the Fitzgerald River. And both of those areas are the richest floristic areas in southwest WA. So basically and I speak for others, don't want that coal mined at all. And so we have to be getting on with nuclear fusion, or we have nuclear fission if we can't, so that we can get Australia off coal mining, but that will take a while because we've got the petrol problem now. And as I've been telling others, and of course Peter Harris with Stand Up Australia, the thing we've got to push for now is to make petroleum out of petrol, ordinary petrol and diesel from coal, because that can be done. It's been known for over 80 years. And by having, I don't know which coal mines would be the best for it, perhaps it's WA, I think probably somewhere in Queensland, that we would have to make petrol out of coal so that we can stabilise petrol prices, because we can't afford to be dictated to by global markets and have people thrown out in the street everywhere and make already the problems with traffic jams, etc., even worse, with people trying to line up for inadequate amounts of petrol every 3 days. We've got to put a stop to that. I mean, our government is so corrupt, they should have seen that and should have been honest. You could look at Hazelwood Power Station in Victoria, which was basically shut down and put on reserve. That should be already all the time ready to go in case it's needed. And if they got a bit extra, they should be putting a plant there to produce oil out of it. If it's got the right coal.
That's fascinating. But the thing is, though, I think right now, I don't think it's ever been clearer to Australia that our political system, Liberal and Labor, are not fit for purpose anymore.
Exactly.
I was telling someone, say you owned a cafe and you put me in charge for a month and you came back and said, where's the profit? And I said, oh, I gave all the coffee away for free. I just felt it was the right thing to do, you know, and all you're left with is the bills for buying the coffee and all these and the power bills and everything. And there's no money to pay for it because I've given everything away for free. You would sack me immediately.
That's right.
And you would sue me. You would sue me and you'd sack me. So to me, I'm thinking, you politicians did this. We need some justice here. You know, there's talk now that the amount of oil they gave away when Howard started it, giving away the gas, equates to $1 trillion worth of profit we've lost from our cut. And that's the debt we're leaving our children.
That's right. We're leaving our children a permanent debt that can never, ever be paid because of our corrupt monetary system. And we have to fix up the banks, and we also have to get better people in charge. You can't have our politicians vetted at places like the Epstein Archipelago, that our politicians do these nasty things because certain people have photographs of them doing various disgusting things that no one would tolerate. Because once the leader of the country ends up justifying that, all the other people with their hidden sexual desires, and we all have them, they'll want to be able to do the same. I mean, I'm amazed that Trump ever got in the first place after his comment about women liking them on the younger side and pussy grabbing, things like that might be locker room talk, but people would never normally state in the open. And the fact that he and others would state that in the open means that there is a culture of degradation of human beings sexually that's becoming all too apparent in society. And if we don't take action, we're all finished. Nobody will want children because they fear they'll be sold to paedophiles.
or even just, I talked to a young man the other day. His wife wants a second child, and he wants to provide a house for them, and he can't do both. If they have a second child, he'll never afford a house. And I said to him, that's your choice. You get a house. What do you want in the future as an old man? What you want? Bricked up air or a family?
That's right.
And this question has been put on him because, like, well, I was born in the 60s. So in the 70s when we came here, one man, even a factory worker, you would have known this, could support a family, pay off a mortgage, go on holidays. I mean, that's where we were. And that is gone. This slow decline. Yeah. I mean, we might have all these gadgets and all these things around us. So we have all this. But basically, people are working a lot harder now for less.
That's right. And that's demoralised people everywhere. I mean, there's been a rise in suicide rate and also of litigation. I mean, the government brought in laws that you had, let's say you're owner of the cafe again, that you have to get your employees jabbed. But the government also brought in a law that if one of the jabbed employees got sick, they could sue you for mandating the jab. So in other words, it makes employees and employers fight with each other rather than seeing that the real problem lies with the government, big pharma, and our independent authorities, which are basically the very rich, manipulating us from behind.
Can I ask you, though, when it comes to being a doctor, now, we grew up, so I grew up in the 70s, and there'd be things like even the Carry On films, all those comedies, but in that they'd often have doctors like a doctor abroad, but there'd always be doctors were held in, they were revered. You were a doctor, you were revered. And one of the reasons they're revered, that even though they were grumpy and even though they were clever, they really believed their Hippocratic oath. That was the story we were sold.
Yeah, that's right. That's the story we were sold.
That was the myth. Was it a myth, or do you think doctors have had that corrupted out of them through just this slow marketing campaign or something? Or where have we got to? Because we've interviewed young doctors now, like Dr. William Bay, and he said he never had to pledge the Hippocratic Oath in medical school. It was
That's
just
right.
assumed.
I didn't have to either. I mean, they seem to have
Wow.
removed that. One of the things in the Hippocratic Oath was that you would not give a woman an instrument to procure an abortion. So it had certain things that I think people perhaps disagreed with by the time my last year came around. But I don't know the details of what happened there. But part of the Hippocratic Oath is also to primum non nocere, don't hurt the patient. You have to think of the patient first. But that's been taken over by bureaucracy now. People like AHPRA, AHPRA, Australian Health Professionals Regulatory Authority. I believe they don't even have a doctor on the board. They just do whatever Big Pharma tells them.
Yeah,
They're
that's
not
right.
an honest
Did
body
you
dealing
see
with
this?
doctors.
Did you see this slowly deteriorate as you were a doctor, as you were going? Did you
Yes,
see the
between
status and the power of doctors being taken away?
gradually it was between 1976 and 1995, but it was gotten a lot worse since. Since new lots of doctors have come up, they've been more controlled by the outside authorities than was the case in the past. A doctor had more freedom in the past to try other things. See, the official medicine we learn at medical school, I used to think anyway, was good for what it dealt with, but often you'd have patients with mixed conditions, patients with very odd combinations of conditions, and that a GP should have a bit of freedom to look at many other medications which are good, but have been suppressed by conventional medication. The classic case is turmeric. I had a what's called seronegative arthritis. I didn't know what it was. It was only a mild form. And when I took turmeric, I suddenly found it all went. And I didn't know that turmeric had that effect on mild seronegative arthritis. And only many years later, when I realised I had celiac disease, I realised that was the underlying cause. But here was a good medication that was just poo-pooed as homeopathic or something that naturopaths was given, was not proper medicine. I mean, it doesn't have major side effects, turmeric. You can eat that quite safely, but it was pushed out of normal medical practice. So the doctors in medical practice tend to resort to many medications that are more toxic than they would be otherwise, because the people haven't tried natural therapies first. And I have much more respect for natural therapies than I used to for that reason. And there was one other person.
Profit? Is that
Sorry.
just because it's profit? There's more money to be made from a manufactured drug, even if it's toxic, than there is from turmeric.
That's true. That's why the Big Pharma encouraged it and pushed down the study of natural remedies. That was pushed aside a long time ago, about 1900 to 1920. So doctors from about 1920 onward were only educated in certain medications which while they were powerful, they were also very toxic. So many useful natural therapies were pushed aside. I mean, I can understand that to some extent, because with natural therapies, there's so many different things and there's so much for a doctor to learn. But the problem is that they concentrated only on these more toxic and highfalutin products and ignored many people with other conditions that were harder to treat.
So can I say, in your time then, say, if you first got into medicine, my feeling is if you do get in as a doctor, whatever field you get into, your driving force is to help people, is to get
That's
sick
right.
people
That's what
better.
gets people in there. That's right.
That's the thing. But once you get in there, there's some realization in your period as a doctor, and you're a walking museum now, really,
That's right.
Is that a business plan took over, and the business plan constantly in a desire to keep big pharma companies alive, just add up everything, add up ethics, everything became secondary to making money.
It did, but not consciously. It works in a different way with the specialists.
Okay.
With the specialists, they have this thing called up to date on their other websites and things that work similarly. And what they do, the big pharma hire people who are cardiologists, neurologists, other specialists, and they have them review the new drugs that are put out, and the cardiologist, neurologist, or whatever, then tells the other doctors, the other specialists, in a digest journal tells them that they found that this drug is very good and this big pharma company's got a wonderful drug, and while it costs a bit more than the others and works rather in the same way, it'd be a better option for them to change over to this different drug. So in other words, the specialists are not working directly with the patients in research. They're listening to what the drug companies are doing with the drug company funded research. So the doctors lose direct contact with the research and they're being manipulated by digest journals. They have to be manipulated by digest journals, they would say, because they haven't got time to read all the specialist journals. So it makes it very difficult for a doctor to practice. But the problem lies in that subset of doctors that have been hired by big pharma to produce the digests, which manipulate the specialist doctors.
So you could say, like, you're a GP and they've got you doing 7-minute appointments from 7, and that's what they've told me, from 7 to maybe 10, 15 at max. So they're there for, say, an 8 or a 10-hour day. They're just going, getting worn out. They go home in the evening, and the system, the health system, is going, read this, read this, read this. You have to read this for the changes. And they literally have no time in their soul to actually research it any further than that. So
that's exactly right. Yeah.
So these are actually good people. Instead of saying demonizing doctors, these are actually good people who are believing that those who are teaching them to be doctors, who apparently have their back, are actually on the side of healing humanity, where in actual fact, sadly, they might go that way, but it's through profit. It has to be profitable.
That's right. So, that's how they're slanting it now, that it has to be profitable as well, which was not the original intent of medicine. I mean, in the colleges, they've now brought in costing of various treatments you can give, which might be true for someone who's very elderly, doesn't have very long to live, but it shouldn't be brought into general medical discussion like that. I mean, a doctor has a commitment to make his patient as well as possible and not consider financial situation. That's up to the superintendent of the hospital or whatever. Says, look, we can't afford that, and you just have to put up with it. But it shouldn't be the decision of the doctor himself. The doctor's trying to get the patient right.
So the doctors themselves could actually suffer from, especially GPs, could actually suffer from depression. And I know there's a high suicide rate amongst them. They could actually be caught that was the ideal I was going for, but now I'm a big pharma drug pusher, and I've got I've got a massive mortgage. I've got my kids in these great schools, and the only way I can fund my lifestyle is to completely be a drug pusher, but big pharma. And this must work on their
it works on their psyche. That's right, because they have to put long hours, they become worn out. And I have to admit myself, I think I'd be worn out much earlier than most doctors because I didn't have that much of a heart to do medicine.
Yeah, that's right. You went a heart in it at the start.
That's right. But those doctors who did have the heart are simply snowed under with work. And that's also what the COVID has done. Many doctors needing money to pay for their mortgages and schools for their children and the mistress as well. Many of these doctors, because they're so busy, they just lose their natural heart for medicine, and they just prescribe and work through medical things mechanically, and it's destroyed the essence of medicine as it should have been and what they hoped to be when they were younger doctors.
Also, this is what we heard. I'm just asking you, but this is what we've heard, and I've done a story about it in South Australia where I wrote a piece about called the Judas Doctors, and that is that there's so much money in administrating vaccines. I mean, the interview we did in Port Lincoln from a woman who got sacked from there, she wouldn't take the jab. She was the administrator of a medical practice, and she said they made this much money from the first jab, this much money from the second jab. They were supposed to give everyone 15 minutes consultation. She said no one got a 15-minute consultation. They were just racing them through like they were drenching sheep. And then if they got the third booster at the same place, they got paid for that, plus an extra fee for actually getting all three done there. And they didn't stop pushing it, even when they had 12 young men in 1 week come down with myocarditis who'd been injected
Sure.
in the surgery. They didn't shut it down. And what the health industry did, this is what we were told by there, in the same town, which is a small town, that another surgery was set up very quickly with 3 cardiologists who were very hard to find in the COVID era.
Mm.
And I'm wondering,
That,
this
yeah.
is Big Pharma doing basically, what would you call it? Trying to manage the crisis.
That's right, and they're providing a lot of jobs for cardiologists, neurologists, etc., dealing with all the side effects, and that basically has given these medical specialists appointments that won't be achieved for another 2 years. They've got waiting lists for 2 years dealing with myocarditis and people with apparent strokes or something like multiple sclerosis from the jabs. So they're making people sicker, giving doctors a lot of work. And many young doctors who've just become neurologists, etc., suddenly find they've got a lot of work ahead of them, but they don't realise that the underlying cause of this is not genuine human illness, but is manufactured medical illness by corrupt big pharma. And that's the real problem, that there's so many people in the jab injuring industry.
Yeah. The other question I'm really interested in, from a doctor's point of view, is we did an interview with a young man yesterday called Riley, and that'll be going up soon. And he presented at hospital with major heart issues. Twice he thought he was having a heart attack, and he was just told, "You've got anxiety." And I've heard this nonstop. People going to hospitals are having epileptic fits. You've got anxiety. Having basically heart attacks, you name it, anxiety. How do you think the doctors reached that, reached the point where they could say that, and they would actually not see or not look at the evidence? They would just say, you've got anxiety. How could that possibly happen? Because this happened across, the diagnosis of anxiety is across Australia, particularly in the COVID era.
Well, that's right. People were genuinely anxious from all the tripe they were told by the government. But when people do get sick and you do have an impending stroke or chest pain of a heart attack, yes, you are anxious. But the problem is that a doctor's supposed to look beyond the anxiety to find what the real issue is. What they're doing to doctors is they're superficialising the practice of medicine. A person looks anxious, therefore he must have anxiety as a diagnosis. That's a basically stupid idea. They should be doing ECGs and neurological tests to find what's really going on. But this superficialisation of medicine has also been going on in the police force in Britain. I was told by a retired DCI that what they're doing, what they did from about 2005, is they'd only try to catch the people actually doing the smuggling of goods, etc., or children or whatever, and they wouldn't go and search for the Mr. Bigs who were behind the whole drug or smuggling operation. So they weren't focusing on finding the real criminals, they were only chasing those who are at the bottom. A doctor who thinks like that is thinking the same way. The patient's anxious, therefore he's got anxiety, and he doesn't look to what's deeper. And if the patient can't give a history, to get the history from the relatives. It's basically destroying the whole practice of medicine, that. And that's what's been given to the medical students now. And we must remember above all that they are now demanding that medical students get the jab before they go into hospitals. And you have to have it proven by serological testing. You usually do it with your GP. Now, this will lead to a lot of fraud. And I think many of the medical students get in by fraudulent reports and tests. But that means they'd have to pay someone a lot of money to do it. But if, say, most of the medical students are not like that and they have been jabbed, all that means is they're going to be sicker later in life, and very likely they won't have children, because all these jabs are filled with we're not exactly sure what they're filled of, but if they're filled with this syncytin protein, which is supposedly part of the COVID molecule, syncytin is related to the syncytin is related to a protein in the human body which ensures the conception, ensures the embedding of the fertilized ovum in the uterus. And so if you make antibodies to syncytin, which is related to this COVID spike protein, you will end up becoming sterile. And also this protein is associated with sperm motility. So those young doctors who are getting jabbed now, they will find themselves in the future being subfertile. And now I should mention something that even I heard in medical school. When they studied sperm ejaculates, they studied it from about 1910. And by the time I was at medical school, they told us in 1976 that male sperm ejaculates has decreased over the previous 50 years. And now, nearly 50 years on, male ejaculates, sperm ejaculates are even less than what they used to be before, and there are more malformed sperm than before. And we only have to wonder, what are the many causes for human sperm malfunction now in the 2020s? And that these things have not been investigated.
Can I just go back to anxiety, though? When you were doing your training, would they say to you, look, you're going to get people who are coming in with heart attack, claiming they have heart attacks, but always go for anxiety, because you're going to find, because can you actually have a heart attack just from being anxious?
Well, if you already have ischemic heart disease and you're anxious over something else, yes, it can trigger a heart attack, but you can prove the difference between the heart attack and the anxiety, because the person already anxious will suddenly have real pain in the chest, and then they'll become even more anxious for obvious reasons, especially if they're faint and they're falling on the floor. So anxiety is a big part of it, but as a doctor, you're not told that people just have anxiety. This is nonsense. It's being told to medical students and young doctors now. And the problem is it's becoming established among young doctors, this inferior way of thinking.
Yeah, because this young man I interviewed, and I've interviewed loads like this, he stopped going to hospital, even though he was having heart issues, because he was just dismissed, you know?
That's right.
Is it hard for you as a doctor, even though you said your heart wasn't in it, but you've still given your life to it?
Yeah,
is it hard to watch the decline of the art of medicine? Because Dr. Paul always talks about the art of medicine, which he says doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
That's right. It's been lost. We have the science of medicine, but the science is corrupted as well. I mean, the basic problem with medicine now, it is dominated by mathematics. See, I'll just give you an example. Let's say we're going to have another type of COVID, say, pudding pox or something like that. They'll make some horrible name there. And they claim that 1 million Australians are going to die. So, or over 1 million. And anyway, they bring in mass lockdowns and jabs. And after a year or so, after this new COVID pandemic has passed, they find that 50,000 people died from the disease. They tested people with motorcycle crashes and things, and they classed that as COVID because the person had a positive sample with the rats test, and most of the people who died were over 86. And we had 50,000 dead. And then the government will announce after the 2 years that these mass lockdowns and jabs saved 1 million lives. The point is that the claim is wrong, because you can't assess just from the DNA of the spike protein or the virus or the accompanying claims of research that you're going to have 1 million die. And so the mathematical claims, even though they're based on correct equations, the numbers inserted into it will simply be wrong, and they're only done to scare people, make them anxious, exaggerate the problem, then make a false claim that the jabs, the masks and the lockdown saved 1 million lives when they didn't save anybody and only made things a lot worse. We've lost the standards of objectivity for science, and this is done through corrupt mathematics. And that's where the real problem is.
You talked about mathematics the other night. Could you expand on that?
Yes, the idea in modern science is that everything is basically a mathematical construction, and that everything is either predetermined or it's governed by a god or gods outside the natural realm. But the idea that if you make more precise mathematics and you reduce science of all sorts to mathematics, you can make precise predictions and make great understanding that you couldn't make otherwise. All of this originally comes from Galileo, who said that the language of nature is written in the language of mathematics, but what he called mathematics was geometry. algebra, the idea of mathematical calculations with numbers, had only just come in at the time. And as you'll probably know, the term algebra is of, and the whole concept is of Islamic invention. It comes from the Islamic world, which introduced the modern Hindu-Arabic number system and the number zero. So it was quite different to what people had studied in science before Galileo. But the problem was that mathematics then became tied up in the notion of Freemasonry with Isaac Newton. And they put forward strange ideas that mathematics would control the universe. If we understood mathematics better, then we would be able to control human thought and control the future, absolutely. Even though, of course, research has shown that you can't. I mean, quantum theory shows that humans do have the potential for free will because the motion of subatomic particles is not predetermined absolutely by everything around them and by their internal content. But see, we've had false theories, things like Einstein's relativity, which have given people the idea that mathematics is perfect and we can make these perfect calculations and predict things in nature and explain them, even though the explanation given by relativity is quite wrong, as I've been going into and researching. But the problem with mathematics is it's now used to dominate society entirely. And if you want to see the best example of that, read Yuval Noah Harari's works. They've been very much popularized around the world. And these give the idea that mathematics is a perfect world and that science will never measure up to it and we have to rely on mathematicians for our future. This is a very nasty idea, and it's a form that's taken over. Well, the Nazis called it Jewish thinking, and it's taken over the thinking of so many people who run our world today. And they don't understand that nature itself is not this perfect mechanism. It is very disordered. And unless we understand that there is an essential disorder in nature, we will keep making mistakes in politics, etc. It's like the Frankfurt School preaching infant sexuality and liberating infant sexuality. What is there to be liberated? Just disorder and just the activities of paedophiles. We have a society whose academia is totally corrupted. It's like people who are becoming transsexuals. I mean, some people are born intersex and they certainly have the right to have their anatomy altered to make them clearly one or the other. But when teachers are telling students that they should change their sex, where does that get the child? The child cannot become a fertile member of the opposite sex. And that obvious fact is being obscured for these people when they become adolescents and adults. And when you become an adolescent or an adult, you've had a transsexual operation, you make surgeons a lot of money, even though government assisted, and worse still, you are a permanent medical patient because you're always getting infections from your disordered anatomy. And this has to be stated clearly and honestly, not like the tripe that is being taught at teachers' colleges today.
No, the detransitioners, they call them, the ones that have transitioned and now speak out about it, feel like they've been betrayed by the state and doctors. They talk about this, the constant pain they're in, the constant medication. I saw something, I think one of the worst images of our era is the young girls proudly showing off their breasts have been cut off and they've got a big scar across their chest. I see that as heartbreaking. But what I found out now is that if they get pregnant and they start filling up with milk, it's actually incredibly painful because there's nowhere for it to go. Yeah, that's
right. And they didn't have the operation properly. They left some breast tissue there, and it produces milk. Yeah, it's dreadful. And a man can never produce
doctors who we deeply believe are there to heal us, and this is done by doctors who are actually portraying these people through an ideology. Can I go to mathematics? So can I just clarify from a lay guy? So what you're saying is the entire scientific community and including health, they kind of believe that maths is their God or it's the language of God. That's how.
That's right. They believe that. That's right. That mathematics will give them a perfect answer for something, and they don't realise that mathematics, especially probabilistic mathematics, can only give you a general statistical presentation or a statistical graph of what is going to happen. It can't. It can't actually find the true cause. It cannot. It cannot predict absolutely. It can only predict on the basis of the variables it knows. And there's other variables which we don't know about, because matter itself is infinitely divisible. And that is something that has been hidden in science for many, many years. There is debate over it, but you get many scientists such as Steven Weinberg implying that there is such a thing as quarks and there is nothing smaller than quarks, or quarks as they call it. But the evidence from Eric Lerner and others finds that subatomic particles like protons, neutrons and electrons are actually vortices. They are vortices of spinning fluid, and they have poles which are basically magnetic poles, and that atomic nuclei organise on geometric principles based upon that. That would have been evident even in the 1940s, but modern mathematics has reduced the study of fluid mathematics and downgraded the use of geometry. And so modern mathematics is clueless to understand why, for example, certain certain isotopes are stable and others are radioactive. And it's just treated as they're just treated as an absolute mystery with a few boilerplate hypotheses, just words, ad hoc ideas trying to explain it. And they can't get through the problem because they're thinking only in terms of modern algebraic mathematics instead of thinking in terms of geometry. And this is causing real problems.
If I get this right, just to make it simpler, there's, because your brain's beautiful, we're keeping up with it, is they look at something like a wave on a beach, and there's a formula they believe. If they can crack the formula or the algorithm, they'll be able to tell you exactly how that wave would collapse and would break. And so they can predict everything if they finally crack the formula for waves and stuff.
That's right, but the problem is the formula is infinite. If you go down to the wave on the beach, say at Fremantle, the wave may have come from India. It's had so many contributors to it. And with Cyclone Narelle, it's going to build up the waves. You can only ever give an approximate answer. You can't give an absolutely true answer. And that's because the absolute truth is infinitely divisible. So it can never be absolute and precise, but you can get to a pretty good approximation. But the problem is that mathematics allows false explanations to be put forward. I mean, you had Isaac Newton, his idea of absolute space. That led to a lot of confusion because Newton claimed there was relative motion and absolute motion, whereas Galileo had gotten it right, 60 years earlier, saying that all motion is relative, and that's how we have to base the world and future science upon. And Galileo's idea was not held to, and we've ended up in the mess in physics that we have today. And the mess in medicine has copied the mess in physics. Because physics loved mathematics, the medicos have copied it with all these predictions of wonderful cures made by drugs that are otherwise just variants of drugs we already have. And
just one more question though, when it comes, and then I want to go to something else about science. There is that test where they were testing for light. If they observe light going through the two slits, if they observe it, it's a wave. If they don't observe it, it's a, I think it's in bars or something like that.
Yeah.
Particle, yeah. So at the heart of it, there's something that just does not make sense, in a way.
It appears
so
not to make
prove
sense.
that mathematics surely the mathematics isn't fixed. It's almost open to observation, can change it. I can't get my head around it, but at the heart of physics, there is this paradox.
That's right, but the paradox occurs because when a particle passes through this two-slit experiments, in a sense, it always passes through both slits because the particle is actually fluidic, and within the particle itself, there is motion that is faster than light, essentially instantaneous, so that the path literally feels its way through the two slits.
So faster than light, but Einstein said nothing can go faster than light, but the experiment shows that something does.
That's right. Yeah. Things do travel faster than light. And I've been able to work that out, and you can see it in the General Science Journal. Just look up my surname, Lofts, and it's there. And I explain how that light itself is a combination of wavelengths, and that the longer the wavelength, the faster the wavelength moves. And that wavelength, all the wavelengths occur in any one single photon. And that it is this is the true explanation for the falsehood they call special relativity. But this is only slowly going to be worked out by others. People still believe in Einstein, they still believe in the logical paradoxes, and this rubbish is taught in physics and high schools as well as universities, and people are feeling total despair at ever inventing controlled nuclear fusion. And this is the practicality of it. That the big fight in the Middle East is over our diminishing energy resources. So that unless we get nuclear fusion solved, you're going to find America, Britain and other countries trying to grab the world's hydrocarbon resources for themselves. You only have to look at Donald Trump's comment that the oil sands of Venezuela really belong to the USA. Remember, he stated that quite openly, and they obviously think that of the people of Iran too, when Anglo-America used to own all the oil of Iran, and then Mohammed Mossadegh declared, well, no, the oil is part of the patrimony of Iran itself. So the Anglo-Americans overthrew him and replaced him with the Shah, who was the nominal monarch, and turned the Shah into a dictator at that time. And he held on until 1978 when the Iranian Revolution occurred, and this mess is still to reach its conclusion in the near future. So if we could get the energy problem solved, we wouldn't have this mess. They could come to an agreement saying, look, we're going to have this energy which will produce enough for all. Eric Lerner's idea is that we use boron and hydrogen, and boron is an abundant element. And if we can get nuclear fusion from that, the whole world will have abundant energy for many centuries.
And fusion is different from fission.
Very different. In nuclear fusion, the atoms combine. In the proton-proton reaction, which occurs in stars, hydrogen becomes helium and it releases a lot of energy. Now, they found out how to use that, but all they did was make a hydrogen bomb from it. So hydrogen bombs are only useful for blowing up cities. So what the people wanted to do from the 1950s was to have controlled nuclear fusion. But that requires an understanding of plasma. That's high energy gases, and requires an understanding that subatomic particles consist of fluid vortices, not of hard little balls or abstract points. And the problem is they haven't applied plasma equations consistently to try to work out the structure of plasma and how we can make it into controlled nuclear fusion. I mean, they've got this giant tokamak thing that they're building in France. It was supposed to have been completed 10 years ago. It's apparently only going to be completed, ITER they call it, and it's supposed to be going to just demonstrate that they can make helium out of hydrogen. But the alternative, the one based on boron, is a very good one, and Eric Lerner is approaching the capability of achieving this now. But it's going to be a lot of problems, and they're going to need a catalyst to ensure the function. But it's something we have to do.
You sure he's suddenly not going to kill himself for no known reason?
No, it's a plasma thing. It won't explode like a hydrogen bomb. It's totally different.
But the scientist himself, you know, we have a lot of scientists who seem to be on breakthroughs, and then on the verge of a breakthrough, they hang themselves with their shoelaces.
That's right. It happened with 2 nuclear fusion researchers. That's right. And it's good that you brought that up. We've got to bring that point out for everyone. That if we can solve the energy crisis, we won't have all this political strife we have now, and we'll be able to get rid of people like the friends of Jeffrey Epstein, who seem to be running our governments everywhere. We'll be able to tackle the issue and deal with it.
They're like vampires.
That's right. That's
so
all
I had an engineer just basically a backyard engineer. He approached me in Adelaide, and he had a spark plug that he designed, but it was built on other designs. He just got his own, and he said you could run Florence on water. It'd go in, it changes it so you could actually run it on water. And he said it was very easy to do. He said, and I said, come on and do the show. He said, if I come on and do the show, they'll kill me. And I was saying to him, well, don't tell anyone. Why don't we just get Florence done, and I'll just keep going. And like now it'd be perfect, because if I could keep going around, and if anyone says I'm running on water, what are you going to do? You know, we have that technology. So can I ask you, I come from the theater, I come from the arts world, or that's where I was. And I learned very quickly in the arts world that the government and a lot of the theatrical community and even the arts community wasn't interested in the quality of art. They were interested in controlling culture. And so they did that by government funding. You needed, if you say you wanted a theatre on to put a play out, you needed government funding because the theatres were too expensive, and you only got a government funding if you ticked certain boxes. LGBT stuff was the big one when we're coming up. So that's how they're controlling cultures downstream from politics. But is science the same way? Is science tribal, based on funding? The funding controls the science, so that they're not so much interested in really making breakthroughs or really discovering how the world works. They're more interested in what they can monetize and profit, even if it's like climate change. This is climate change, it's happening. But this is why so many scientists are on board, because they want to eat, they want to pay their mortgage, and they want to disprove climate change. They could end up either dead or just irrelevant. And so is this what's happening there too? And because we base our reality on what comes from science and arts, basically this is how they're controlling us, with well done theatre from both sides, which might not actually be true at all, a true representation of the actual living world.
That's absolutely right. I have a friend, she's a visual artist, and she's always complaining about that. Absolutely true in arts, and it's absolutely true in science. They only fund what they think they can make a lot of money out of. That's why with many existing drugs, we constantly have variants applied to the drugs. Often the variants may have more side effects, and they haven't been properly investigated, because the variant drug proves a bit more effective than the standard drug. Then they bring it in and the patients only get the side effects later. It was like that Vioxx scandal. They concentrated on its ability at treating rheumatoid arthritis, and they ignored its potential for causing heart attacks. And so 50,000 people died who didn't, or got heart attacks who didn't have to. So yes, the science is extremely corrupt, and people just fund their friends. And that's why things like Einstein have gone unchallenged for the last 80 years.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Germany was a leading physics nation. There were people there who were Nobel Prize winners. They said that Einstein was bunk, but they couldn't actually nut out the problem because they didn't understand enough philosophy. I was able to do it because I started reading Nietzsche, and Nietzsche had a very penetrating understanding of the issues and helped me to understand so many of our modern philosophers better and how corrupt modern philosophy is.
Can you just expand on that a little more? Because this is really, I'm more interested in philosophy than anything. What was it about Nietzsche exactly that saw him penetrate through stuff?
Right. He wrote a small article called, it's on the science or objectivity outside the moral sense, that he knew in order to be able to combat claims of moralizing, etc., you had to be able to find something that was objectively or physically true, and that you have to base your moral thinking and how you think scientifically on fact first of all, before you bring emotion into it and try to suppress it. And his article was very insightful. He saw the relation between light and sound, and I wondered how he'd gotten that. I found it was due to the German language because of certain peculiarities there. But he was able to see that science itself is really an applied type of art, and that in order to make science really work, you have to have a proper objective principles on which it is based. He couldn't actually sort these out fully, but he knew that science would be corrupt unless it got rid of what he called modern ideas. And he didn't particularly associate it with Jewish ideas because they weren't particularly developed then. But he saw that modern ideas would lead to massive confusion among people. And in his best known work called Thus Spoke Zarathustra, in books 2 and 3, he outlines the situation. And so help me, he ends up presenting an idea that's basically that of Einstein's general relativity, but it's put in such a way that you have to know a bit about general relativity before you saw that he was referring to it. He's walking at night and he suddenly comes to a gate, and one side of the gate says backwards, the other side says forwards. And a dwarf that is sitting on his back, representing Einstein, who was only a baby then, says to him, "Do you not understand that forward and back have to meet sometime?" and basically that all
Wow.
of history is circular, so that after a suitable number of Google trillions of years, you and I would be sitting here together having exactly the same discussion all over again. That's the
Yeah.
idea that Nietzsche was trying to reveal, is what modern science leads to. It leads to everything to be precise, to be absolutely mathematical, to an extreme degree that all that will ever happen in the future is we'll just reproduce the past all over again. And it basically negates science entirely, since whatever happened either is predetermined or it has no cause at all. And it negates
I,
science
I,
altogether.
I think also one thing we're realizing now, I mean, we have a country now who's terrified of the truth.
Yes. Oh,
People,
yeah.
they're not doing it. They're saying, you know, they're trying to end free speech. What they're trying to do is make the truth so dangerous. People, that's why they freak out. If you start these discussions, we had this discussion in some cafes, people would be leaving the cafe, you know, almost like, I don't want to look at it. You know, I don't want to hear it. I don't want it infecting me, because I know I'm living in a world of lies, but I'm comfortable. I figured out how to do it. I'm paying my mortgage. I'm feeding my kids. And so I'm benefiting from living in the lies. And the
That's
truth
right.
is dangerous. We met a man who came over from Africa. He was living in a Sudanese refugee camp that he moved into to educate himself, because in his village there was no schools. So he moves to a Sudanese refugee camp, very dangerous place, he said, and then basically educated himself, came to Australia, got a job working for the government in Victoria. And he said, I got a memo. This is what he talked to us about. I got a memo that said, if anyone in any of the civil servants talk about Gaza or Israel, if they post anything about it, if they wear anything about it, if they're heard having a discussion over the water, you know, the water, whatever you call the water bottle, they're immediately dismissed, summarily gone.
That's right.
So they have to go through life seeing this thing and not talking about it. And so it's led to a world now that you and I live in now, where people can no longer debate, because
That's
those
right.
that believe this side cannot risk being proven wrong, because then they'll have the truth and their life could become a misery.
That's right.
So instead, they hold off the truth seekers like yourself and go, oh, you're just anti-Semitic. You're
that's right. That's how they
Islamophobe.
do it. Yeah.
You're a climate denier.
Yeah.
These are the border guards basically saying, keep the truth out of here, because we're basically building a world of lies, and what can we do about it? We're so small, so we're just going to live and try to survive within it. Theoretically,
right.
you could believe
That's
that.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the best doctor I ever worked for, I mean, apart from the tutor I had, or him too, but the best doctor I ever worked for was a Dr. John Freeman down in Royal Hobart Hospital. He was hard to get along with, and he died only last year, but he was hard to get along with. But the thing is that what he demanded to do to patients was a bit different to others. Rather than use the chemical name for a tablet you'd give to the patient for a medication, he'd always want the trade name written there. And the reason why was because different companies had different quality standards with their medications. So he wanted to ensure the best was done, which was often the German brand, and he'd always insist the trade name be used. And he was very different to other doctors there, who thought only in a very mechanical style and just wrote down the chemical name or the agreed pharmacological name rather than the trade name. And it was only later I came to realise that he was a very concerned and understanding person. He also stood up for the forests in Tasmania when other doctors did not. And he was a member of the Liberal Party, not the Labor Party. But I think as he got older, he came to realise how useless that party was.
Yeah, we're living in the era now where they're gone. The other thing that really interests me, though, and this is what leads to a discontent in someone's soul. All of us are born, not all of us, but a lot of us are born with a hunger to understand how the world works.
Yes.
I don't know how it works. I don't know if I've even seen a truth, but I've always been searching for it as a writer, as an artist. It just interests me. But this is what I thought, and just going to pass it to you, because you've got a hunger for truth. Now, let's believe you don't believe in God. You believe we're just created by the universe. You know, we're a universe. It's evolution. I don't think nature would give us an appetite for something if there was no way to feed it. So they wouldn't give us nature would not give us a hunger for the truth if there was no truth to find. It's a waste of resources.
That's right.
Now, I don't think God, no, I don't think there is a God. I don't think God would give us a hunger for finding the truth if there was no truth to find. What's the point? You're just
That's right.
basically
Not
like a
fair.
goldfish going around. So the truth is out there, and that they're trying to control us by making it difficult to head off on this journey. And I do wonder if that is one of the things of our movement, is that we have this hunger for the truth, to understand what's happening, and we're brave enough to go looking for it. And like yourself, but that means you have to be a misfit. In fact, I don't know what you think about Jung, but I got this, I'll just bring it up. Jung or Jung, whatever it is. I saw him, and I think it's his. You don't know with the internet now. It could be just attributed to him. Probably never said it. Where is it? Here it is. The deep critical thinker has become the misfit of the world. There is no coincidence. To maintain order and control, you must isolate the intellectual, the sage, the philosopher, the savant, before their ideas awaken people. And this is kind of, regardless of what you think of him, this is you.
That's right. He's quite right in that statement there. Anybody who does think they want to keep quiet or they want to shut up forever will find ways to discredit him. That's been happening all the time. Jung had his own strange ideas, but he's quite right there. No doubt about it.
But do you think, though, as a searcher for the truth like yourself, one of the pitfalls is you might end up with strange ideas because you're on a path that might be unexplored, and the only way you can articulate what you find is using the senses you have and some of the knowledge you've learned. But basically, you are going to get things wrong. Because,
that's right.
And then if you can critically think, if you can critically think and turn it over and prove that's wrong, then you can go, okay, well, maybe it's something else. Because this is where we are now, you know? This is where we are. We're in a world that is becoming darker, even though everything looks the same. I've got a song I call, someone's doing a human version now called Remains, and it said, everything is gone and yet remains. So we can see the houses, petrol stations, everything around us looks the same, but inside of us, we go, something has completely changed.
That's right. You know, we can see we can see the limitations of the system that we live under, and it is a very sobering thought. I can actually bring a story of that, which might sound odd. I was only about 5 or 6 years old. Yeah, I was just playing with little plastic animals. You know, you get them in cornflake packets, and I was just
yeah.
That's right. And I was just pretending they were explorers and going all over the house. And finally, the exploration came to an end. They'd been to all the rooms of the house, and I thought, I don't want to take them out in the backyard. They'll only get dirty and lost. And I just found a sense of emptiness, that life is a constant exploration. I just felt existentially frustrated by that. And it's that same sense of frustration you feel as you get older and you find that you're being manipulated by systems and that you can't see and do what you'd really like to do. And that childhood frustration came back in a much bigger sense, seeing what happened when they started to have medical cutbacks by 1980, when they had that economic depression at the time, and all the mess that's occurred since. And the real frustration of finding that I believed the lies that vaccines were safe for 30 years. That's the thing I've got to emphasise, and what makes me different to people like Andrew Wakefield and Judy Wileman, who saw it for themselves and made the correct decisions without having their minds biased by people peddling, either honestly or dishonestly, prejudices as scientific truth.
Yeah, and so the real truth with vaccines then is they're not safe and effective. Some might be, some might not have side effects, and some might work a little bit. But the real truth behind it is that vaccines are a perfect business model.
That's right.
You have to take it to stay in society. So basically, I was talking last night. So I said this game, but I'll say it to you. So right now, the corporations or whoever's behind it has set up a system where you are, as soon as you're born, 20 minutes in, you get your first vaccine, hepatitis B.
Yeah.
Because obviously, as a baby, you're going to go out and sell your body for sex
That's
on a
right.
street
Yeah,
corner.
paedophiles everywhere when you're only a 5-day-old infant. That's right. That's why you have
Yeah,
it.
that's right. So there you are. There you are. So,
Yeah.
but basically, they christen you with the christening, the baptism of
Mark of the
science.
beast.
There you go.
Mm.
Yeah, you've done. If you
Mm.
get injured by that vaccine, whether you get eczema or whatever, or you become autistic, or you're going to
Mm.
need medication, who gives you the medication that you buy or the
Yeah,
government
big
pays
time.
for? The same people who gave you the Hep B.
Yeah.
And what they're actually saying is, and this is what's really interesting, they're saying that in our filthy, dangerous, toxic society, this little child that has been sent to us by the universe or God, whichever you believe, is totally
Mm.
incapable of surviving unless us incredible apprentice gods, us scientists, have actually filled your veins full of manufactured shit.
Vaccines, that's right.
The
And
only way you can survive.
that's
And
right.
then they
I
go
think
on through life finding different ways to make you take the medication for life. Like I remember I was with a group of guys, there was 150 of them. All of them were on blood pressure medication. Every single one of them forever. Ka-ching, 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 ka-ching. All these things. So if they found a cure for diabetes, which might be caused by vaccines, they wouldn't want it out there because that ends the money train. So it's
that's
the
right.
cures are hidden. The cures are hidden from cancer and everything because it's just not profitable. So humans are being made sicker and
That's right.
kept at a certain level of unhealthiness because it's profitable. And then BlackRock and all those companies, because we've been talking to funeral directors, they're buying up all the funeral homes. And so at the end of your home, when one of these things finally kills you, they also, you go to the grave and they sort of milk you for some extra money then. So basically you're a cash cow your entire life. You're not a citizen of a free world. You're just an economic unit that they're going to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze to the end of your life. And if you dare stand up against it, you're an anti-vaxxer, you're a climate skeptic, you're anything. How dare you free think and question us? You are a heretic.
That's
So
right. You
they've
become a
really
drug.
basically, they've really basically created a religion, and it's actually a business model that they've wrapped in the dogma of a fake religion, put on the prayer on the front, safe and effective, and then sold it to the world. And if you question it, well, if they could, they'd be burning us at the stake.
That's right. It's all a religion. They've conned the actual religions, whether you're Jew or Christian or Muslim or whatever, and you have people who are the ministers of those religions actually peddling it on their own people. It's disgusting.
Yeah. They go for doctors like yourself. I know you retired before, but if you'd gone through COVID, I'm pretty sure you would have probably lost your license. And then, like all these doctors I've been interviewing and supporting, the process is not only the punishment for them, but if you're a young doctor, they're prosecuting people like Dr. Miley, torturing her life, basically to make sure that you do what you're told. Because if you speak out and you think vaccines cause autism, you'll be treated like these doctors. Is that what you want? You know, talk to your wife in her mansion. Talk to your wife in her new Tesla. Talk to your kids on their new mobile phones. Do you really want to lose all that because you yourself have finally found the moral courage to stand up and go, I've got a question about vaccines?
Yeah. Well, that happened to a friend of mine. We've been studying the origin of religion, and he was an unusual religious group called Mandaeans, which are the only surviving Gnostics from ancient times. And his wife is a pharmacist at a major Sydney teaching hospital. And when I told them about the danger of vaccines, well, they didn't listen initially because she herself was a pharmacist. She got the first 2 jabs safely, but the 3rd jab, she was badly injured and couldn't come to work for quite a few weeks. She had to take that time off. And then she realised that what I'd been saying was correct. And they immediately came onto my side. It seemed to have disturbed the other pharmacists at this teaching hospital. And then the teaching hospital stopped mandating it on people because not only her, but many others were injured by the 3rd jab. So it's up to people being awake everywhere. But of course, they're still peddling the jabs. They're just recommending it now, not actually forcing it on people and forcing them to lose their job if they don't take it. Because if they did do that, they'd lose most of their staff.
Well, I guess the perfect example of the profit-driven business model is thalidomide. They'd
Yes,
made
of
this
course.
drug. There
Mm,
must have been doctors knowing it was causing these horrendous injuries, and it's skipped generation. I've
that's
met
right.
3
Mm,
people now who have thalidomide, not because their mother took it, but their grandmother took it. It skipped the
yeah,
mum, and they're still affected
still
now.
coming
So,
through.
but
Yeah.
basically, for 20 years, they knew. They
Mm,
knew or highly suspected, and they kept these doctors stayed quiet because so it really
mm,
makes you wonder what is a doctor now? It's sold to the world as this is the one. Because to me, what's what I want from a doctor? Say you were my GP, I just want the truth. I
that's
want you
right.
to turn up and say, Michael, you're too fat. Michael, if you don't exercise, you're going
Mm,
to die. That's my opinion. Michael, this, I want the truth. I don't want you to sugarcoat it. I just want to tell
mm,
me what you think. And if I want another opinion, I'll go to another one. But
that's right.
now,
Mm,
basically, Big Pharma and the government are in the room and they're going to the doctor, you tell him what we tell you to tell him. So
that's
my
right.
relationship with you is
Mm,
fractured. I no longer have a relationship with my doctor. I have a relationship, an abusive relationship with Big Pharma, who's the
that's right.
elephant in the room governing everything.
That's right. The one size fits all mentality. They want everybody
Yeah,
jabbed. They want everybody to take statins or whatever to fight heart disease. And they're not
yeah,
considering the individual variants and the fact that many people have major reactions to these statins.
yeah.
And they're
And also
concentrating on,
Alzheimer's comes from somewhere. You know,
that's
there's
right,
these
many
the
causes.
bravest doctors like yourself. You met yourself. They're so. It's incredible to listen to people like you because I've seen other doctors coming out saying Alzheimer's never existed 100 years ago. It didn't exist.
Well, it was
It's
rarer.
it's it's
Yeah.
yeah, and now now there's like an epidemic. It's caused
Mm.
by something in our
In our
society.
environment. That's right. See,
Yeah.
and vaccines weren't the only cause of problems. The reason for me getting celiac disease, as I found, the gastroenterologist told me, he said many antibiotics they used to give were very toxic and they changed the gut flora. I
Wow.
had streptomycin when I was little for pink eye, and that streptomycin apparently was a major cause of things like celiac disease, but they only discovered it years later, and it was withdrawn from human use, I think, in the late 60s.
Yeah.
It used
Wow.
to be
Because
given for TB.
I've had I've had several, about 3 people I know now who've had leaky gut. They've been astounded. They feel really when sick, and
Mm.
they've got a leaky gut. But the stuff that they're putting on the wheat to get rid of insects causes the insects to have
Glyphosate.
leaky gut.
Yeah, that's
So
right.
is that us?
That's right. You've got complicated problems. You end up with two different things causing what appears to be one common condition. And so all the
Mm.
various drugs we make and things we use on farms, etc., you get the illness, but you don't know what the underlying cause is. It's like Parkinson's disease, which is much commoner in rural people and is associated with things like Derris dust and other toxins that are commonly used on farms.
Well, let's move. It's a great discussion. Let's move to solutions. So I would say the majority of the world's people who weren't doctors would want doctors to live up to the Hippocratic Oath and would want doctors to tell them the truth. I mean, I know a few people go there to have a relationship with them. You know, they just love visiting them.
Mm,
But
yeah.
a good majority, I would only go to a doctor if I was so sick that I thought I need to go to a doctor. But most of us would go to a doctor for that
Mm.
relationship. So how do we get back there? How do we wrench our health system away from these oligarchs, away from whoever else is doing it, or even
Mm.
how do we rescue it from the philosophy of profit over health, and that health should
Yeah.
come first? How do you think we could even start the journey to reaching a world where health trumped profit?
Well,
Or do you
the
think it's
first
impossible?
thing is we've got to allow doctors to decide what to do for their patients rather than being given blanket orders by groups like AHPRA, which are controlled by big pharma. So doctors have to be given some freedom to think about the individual patient and tailor solutions. The next thing is we've got to make sure that medical research is properly funded and is not controlled by drug companies. I can remember a drug company was comparing the effects of Septrin, that's cotrimoxazole, which they were pushing, as compared to amoxil, which was a fairly new drug back in 1978, and Septrin was a bit newer. And they had an article in which they gave the Septrin, the one they wanted, at the recommended dosage, but they gave the amoxil at a lower dosage than would be recommended. So they put a bias into the article to favour their own antibiotic. They didn't need to. The antibiotic's an excellent one, but they biased the research they did. And I thought, if they do it for this thing, they'll do it for all sorts of research. But the real shock was that the actual capsules of the Septrin were put in a little plastic container that looked like a gun, with the antibiotic tablets or capsules looking like they were bullets or slugs in the gun.
Wow.
And so it looked like a child's toy. And I thought, how stupid, trying to manipulate the GPs that way. So I was reading the article, and they were handing out, the drug rep was handing out their little toy guns to the GPs. And then I looked up, and these two GPs, they were older than 55. They're about 60 years of age. They weren't young doctors. They were going bang, 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 like little kids at each other with these plastic antibiotic guns. I mean, these drug reps had gotten into the minds of the GPs to make them act like little kids. And it was then that I realised the power of the drug companies, that these two GPs, who I can regard even today as competent ones, as absolutely brainwashed by the drug companies. The drug companies know how doctors think, and they know how to manipulate them and bring out the inner child and distract them from critical thinking. It's really dreadful.
But basically, the big pharma companies now are primarily, basically marketing companies.
That's right.
It's all about
That's
marketing. It's all about relationships. It's all about making sure doctors, you know, because I've seen stuff coming from America. A doctor can make $1 million if he vaccinates enough children in a year.
Yes, he could. Yeah.
That's a lot
Terrible.
of money.
I mean, that's right. A lot of money for manipulating and messing with children's health.
Yeah. And knowing that if he stopped like that, I know the High Wire, they found that doctor who proved that unvaccinated children were healthier, and he wouldn't publish the study. We've got him on record saying that on camera. He wouldn't publish the study because he'd be finished.
That's right. They'd just knock him down. They'd find an excuse. They'd set up a honey trap or do something like that to catch him. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and this is why there's an incentive to even, like, basically these strange suicides we see, the incentive is all money and greed. So when we come back to it, you have this thing, you have all these sayings, but you come back to some really core sayings that greed is one of the main problems of humanity.
That's right. It's easy to subvert people, especially when a doctor has gotten himself into a lot of commitments and has to pay for schools, etc. When Big Pharma offers a bit extra, and the doctor thinks, well, that pharma, that company had some good products, I may as well take it. There should be nothing wrong with it. He innocently falls into the trap, and then step by step, as he gets into more corrupt ways of thinking, as he gets older, he gets divorced from the original research done, and he just follows a way of life which other GPs or other specialists get caught in, and they don't see that they've been lured into severe error.
Yeah, I got a perfect story about that. I'm not going to tell you the doctor's name, but I was in a country town, and this doctor had been the major pusher of all vaccines. But when COVID came along, he was it. He was getting it into the schools. He got all the kids vaccinated in all the schools. The anti-vaxxers in the community couldn't stand him. But he changed. I went and had a conversation with him because he did come across. But I went in to see him. I happened to be in the town and just chat to him. He wouldn't do a video or a video interview. Wouldn't do an audio interview. We just had a discussion. And I saw his face. He said, this is a farming community. And he's watched all these young men who used to be incredibly fit out there working on these cattle stations, coming in like geriatric cripples, literally just able, because of myocarditis, to get into the thing and sit there. And he'd done it. And he hadn't done it on purpose. He didn't want to hurt these guys at all, but he believed. And you saw this. And the thing is, he'd built up a great surgery. He was well known in the town. He was well respected, making good money. So he'd got his family, you know, he'd become wealthy. He was well respected, all these things on his side. And yet here he has all these young men coming in that he's contributed to their slow death.
Decline. That's right.
That must be devastating to a doctor who believes they're doing right. So that's why I'm saying I don't think saying, oh, doctors are bad. I don't believe that. I don't believe people. I even in these corporations, I don't believe people are bad. But the corporation itself is a psychopathic organism that
That's
just has
right.
to make money no matter
It's
what.
worse than the individuals who are in it. That's right.
Yeah,
I draw the exception for people like Jeffrey Epstein, some of the people right at the top, but the others become
Oh,
ignorant.
yeah. No. There's people at the top that know. There's without a doubt there's evil people. Without a doubt, there's evil people.
Yeah.
We see it everywhere. But I think the vast majority of people are not. I just gotta. But then you maybe through doctors met it. I just believe but we get caught in this system that is quickly becoming, I would say, a society which is not nurturing for the human soul. Humans
That's right.
need to speak. Humans need to dance and sing and laugh and love and have kids and enjoy their kids and work to support their kids. But they need to live in that and be alive. And we've got to a stage now in this country, we're sitting on all this mineral wealth. And as this young man who came to my house said, him and his wife are working 2 jobs. They're both working. The kids in daycare, probably getting indoctrinated, and she wants another child, but they simply can't support it because all they're doing is surviving, and yet they're sitting on a golf club. And we've got here through either incompetence or in reality, this is corporate driven. This is we're exactly where the corporations want us to be. And it's only now as human beings, the both of us, that we're going, where we're here. This is taking us into darkness. So it can be fixed,
It can be, but it's very difficult. I mean, the COVID's been on for 6 years now.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to hoodwink people, like people in Israel. They say the Jewish population in Israel is 90% for exterminating the Palestinians and flattening Iran. I mean, there are many Jewish people who are dead against Zionism. They've seen the corruption of it, and they see that it will basically destroy civilization, because so many of the people who are CEOs of big pharma companies like Pfizer, Albert Bourla, who's Jewish and a Zionist. But it must be remembered that Zionism wasn't, political Zionism as we have it today, was not invented by Jews. It was invented by the Anglican Church in 1840. And that the first lot of public money given to the Zionist movement was in 1861 from Melbourne, here in Australia. And people are not aware of that. Yes, from Melbourne, Australia. And I'll give you the reference. It comes from Moses Hess's book. Moses Hess was a German Jew who'd been to England, learnt about Zionism and brought it to Germany. He educated Friedrich Engels in what we call the principles of communism. But in 1870, he wrote a book called Rome and Jerusalem. And you can get it online. You can get the English or the original German. They say the same thing. And you look at the very end of the book in note 10. It writes it in Roman numerals, note X. And he mentions there that associated with Melbourne University, the first lot of public money has been given to the Zionist movement. And Moses Hess's book was published in Germany in 1870, and Theodor Herzl, who's meant to be the founder of Zionism, read this book in 1875, and it converted him to the Zionist ideology. And so he was the one who
Zionist ideology at its core. What's it trying to achieve?
The Zionist ideology basically works through Christianity, things like the Schofield Bible, and it claims that the promise of Christians, when they believe in Jesus, the promise of Christians also has a separate promise from the Old Testament given to Jews. And with the Schofield Bible and all its footnotes, it says that Judaism allows for a special right for Jews to take over the Middle East for themselves. And thus you have many Christian Zionists saying that Jesus will return when the Jews control the Middle East. And that's why they ended up supporting Zionism, and why you had the Balfour Declaration, where Balfour, who was a politician, promised Lord Rothschild that once the British got control of Palestine, they would hand it over to Jewish colonists. And Ibn Saud, who was the head of the Arab forces then, who were fighting the Ottoman Turks, which owned the area, he then regretted supporting the British. He said if he knew they were going to give it to the Jews, he wouldn't have fought for the British and would have stayed with the Ottoman Turks. But anyway, he helped the Ottomans, the British fight the Ottomans. But it's very important to remember that the main army force used by the British to take Palestine were the Australian Light Horse. And so Australia was disproportionately involved in the seizure of Palestine from the Ottomans. So Australia was very deeply involved in Zionism, even though many of our awake people would like to have nothing to do with it and like to pretend that it's some faraway country in which these faraway problems are occurring. It's a terrible problem, and it comes from interpreting ancient Israel, as stated in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, with the modern Zionist state of Israel. And it's a very far series of arguments to connect the Israelites of old, of 1000 BC, with the present day state of Israel, because most of the Palestinians have been shown to be related to more ancient peoples there, and that the whole of Palestine's gone through complicated transformations. The people, when they were originally Jewish, and according to the Old Testament story, they exterminated all the earlier people, the Canaanites. But these Palestinians, when Christianity came about, many of them converted to Christianity. And after Islam came along about 650 AD, many of these Christians eventually converted to Islam, since in Islam, Jesus is regarded as a prophet and is very highly regarded. So it was very easy for Christians to convert to Islam, because if they did, the amount of tax they had to pay was lowered, since Islamic believers in an Islamic country are charged lower tax than non-Islamic people. But whereas the Jews were always...
How people would confirm what there would be an incentive to change, you know what I mean?
There was that the incentive was only for Christians to have their tax lowered. The Islamic rulers did not encourage conversion, because they wanted the Christians and Jews to be obedient slaves who always paid a good tax benefit. That's why Islam didn't push the idea of conversion then.
Can I put another theory to you? This is only a theory. This is only from my observations on the road, and I was in Melbourne, and some of them come after time. So I don't know if it's true, but so you remember the Grenville disaster where the bridge fell on the train?
Oh, yes, very well. That was at Lidcombe Hospital. I was there when it happened. Mm.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
So you were one of the doctors?
No, I wasn't. I was a medical student, and they had an emergency rescue group at Lidcombe, and they had the misfortune. It happened at the time when the doctor was at a conference and he couldn't get there, and they were the last rescue group to arrive at Granville, even though it was only about 8 kilometres away. It's a terrible mess. It was part of the mess that.
Yeah, in that time, and every disaster since, I've always seen our leaders, you know, whether American leaders, English leaders, or Australian leaders, in times of disaster, they always refer to God. Let's keep the families of the victims in our prayers, is one thing they generally say. When COVID came, as far as I remember, none of the messaging from the government mentioned God. And the churches were all closed, and the vaccination centres were open. And the new mass happened every morning, and I'm sorry to all those who've heard this. It's the new mass would be in the morning, and they would stand up and they would go, "We lost an 84-year-old to COVID. We lost a 96-year-old. We lost a 101-year-old." I heard them say that one day, a 101-year-old. What they're really saying in the subtext of the messaging, this is only my theory, was that God has decided to enact his wrath, his revenge, whatever. You know, it's a wrath. It is a pandemic. We can't control. It's coming to wipe loads of us out. But it's okay, because the God of science has created a defense from the wrath of God. And the churches are all closed, but the vaccination centres are all open, safe and effective. Protect your family. Protect your family not from COVID. Protect your family from the wrath of God. And so what people did was they made a theological decision to take it. And that's
Mm,
why they can't debate it. You can't debate religion. If a Jehovah
yeah,
Witness turns up at the door, good luck trying to talk them out of it. You
that's
can't do
right.
it.
Mm,
And this is like with COVID now and the woke agenda and everything else. They're pushing created religions, manufactured religions upon us, and maybe all religions manufactured religions upon us that you can't question.
that's right.
I'm just wondering what you think of it, whether you think I'm bonkers or this. It's
No,
just my observation of watching it.
you're absolutely right, because this sort of manipulation is exactly the way that religion acts when they want people to obey a particular
Mm.
agenda. And the leaders want to invent this new religion in order to control us. If you look back to the history of religion, whether Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Confucianism, there were certain social conditions that the rich wanted to use to stabilize the society so that they could continue to rule. But the various problems facing the different people, whether it was the people in Palestine in about 500 BC, the people of Rome in Naught AD, or the people in Arabia about 600 AD, these conditions were different. So you ended up in differences in religion. You only need a very slight familiarity with Islam to see that most of it is based on Christianity, but has a simplified theology. So it's fairly easy to understand. Whereas many of the complexities with Christianity are very hard to understand. And often people have wondered why the religion teaches what it does. But with this COVID, yes, the conditions that are occurring with these viruses, they want people to believe a load of bullshit that is basically contrary to proper medicine. You have people like very senior people like Bill Gates talking about a universal vaccination. There is no such thing. And also the vaccinations for everyone. I have an article here, Baxter and Hodgkin, an Australian article that says that even identical twins given injections or vaccines respond differently. There is too much uncertainty and disorder in injecting people with all this muck. No wonder everybody's got autoimmune disease, and they keep increasing the vaccine schedules. I mean, there was only about 4 or 5 when I was a child getting vaccines before I can remember, back in 1956 and 57. But it's far worse today. That
72, I think, the last time I saw in America. And they want to add to it.
That's right.
One last question. I'll wrap it up for now. I think we'd love to get you back on, and be interesting if Oosterhuis sees us to join us. But I just want to see, where do you see the hope for humanity going forward?
The hope for humanity is in people waking up to genuine science and seeing its difference to mathematical manipulation. And they should be looking at their own religions and backgrounds to see where this cultural manipulation comes from. A good start is Einstein, but we have to go and see the more recent people like Yuval Noah Harari, and all of this bunk that's being pushed onto young people today, and of course the Frankfurt School. I'd advise people to look up videos to find about the Frankfurt School and the pushing on of people of sexual libertinism and all the problems it leads to, including the spread of STDs, which are far worse now that people have been giving these jabs, because it causes the collapse of the immune system and gives rise to cancer and much worse and much more frequent STDs. So if people start looking at these, the history of what's happening right now with our health, they'll start to understand things better. And what they need to do when they think about it is look at the mathematics that lies behind these corrupt claims. I'll just give an example of this. Back in 2021, when there was the COVID had spread into India, they were saying on the ABC that 4,500 people were dying a day from COVID in India. India has 1.4 billion people. The average death toll every day is 57,000. That 4,000 people mentioning dying of COVID is not a newsworthy item in another country.
Yeah.
People don't understand statistics.
Yeah. Wouldn't even make a blip. Yeah. They also eradicated it with their little parcels of ivermectin and
Ivermectin.
hydroxychloroquine,
That's right.
and they all and they
They all
and
got
but
better.
there's no money in ivermectin. No
That's
money in
right.
it.
And that
No,
was a wonderful discovery too. Yeah.
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 One more question. So say we are right. Say that the corporations or whoever's behind it is creating a world of lies for you to live in. And if you accept that you live in the world of lies, the deal is that they'll give you a job and you can pay your bills and all this, and they'll leave you alone. If you try to tell the truth, you get ostracized, you can get cancelled, and they can come after you.
Mm.
What do you think at your age now, after everything you've been through, what are the benefits for hunting out the truth, for actually deciding I'm going looking for the truth, I'm going to decide for myself? What are the benefits? Why should people try basically escape the lies and go searching for the truth? What are the benefits?
Yeah. The reason is that we have to protect those who are children today. I never had children of my own. I never found a suitable person to marry. But we have to do this to protect children alive today. We can't have them just die off, jabbed, hiding in a basement, just rotting away somewhere. If we have any love of children at all, it's not the paedophilic type, it's the protection of children so they grow up into sensible, sane adults. This has been entirely abandoned in our society. And unless we recover this, it's the end for all of us, not just in Australia. It's the children that matter more than we do.
Do you know, I'll tell you something very, very interesting. I've been living on the road now for 4 years, going to town, having conversations like this. And I get invited to come to new religions, not the established religions, all of them Christian so far. But you go to the back of a town hall, they've hired a room, they've made it into a church, and it's full of young people. And there's a big mass. You do wonder if the message, because I sit there and thinking, now Jesus didn't have X, he didn't have Instagram, Australia wasn't known then, and yet here in a country that he didn't know existed then, he's still filling rooms and still drawing a crowd. I wonder if the messaging is that the fact that people believe Jesus cares for them, God cares for them, gives them worth. And that because they've got a connection with God, and that science and this world that they're leading us into, in that world, you are worthless. In fact, they're pushing maids now. Hey, doc, you're a bit old. You've done a lot of things, but we need your house. We can get migrants in there. Why don't you do one for the team and go euthanize yourself? In Canada now, it's the biggest cause of death. So it's all about devaluing the human. So you just feel almost less than a slave. So
that's right.
And so God offers you are a collection of miracles. You are a gift to the universe. It's selling a better product. I wonder if the one thing that the whatever's happening, the Achilles heel in their entire agenda is God and the people's need for God, whether we invented God, whether God created us, but there's a need in people for worth. And in this current world, the only thing that offers them individual worth is God and the love of each other. And eventually, maybe that's what'll stave off the darkness.
I suspect so, that people may believe in many gods or one God, but
it doesn't matter what God you believe in. But
that's right. It's a fellowship we find in fellow men that counts the most. To find good friends, people you can totally rely on, including with your money, that's absolutely vital to keep humanity functioning. And my friends, I want to care for their children if they die. I don't want to go into specifics, but it's most important because these people represent our future. And it's just absolutely disgusting that people would basically abandon children to paedophiles and our confusing load of rubbish we get on TV and mass media now. We're basically condemning children to no future at all. And that's why I have to stand up for it. I have no other chance. I have no other choice. That everything is so corrupt. We've got to stand up fully as you do. Yeah,
it's no choice. I was talking to Stuart Chapman today. It's no choice. There's no choice. We have to do it. We just don't know the path yet, but we just have to keep going. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's been a brilliant
100.
conversation, Doctor. I look forward to
Same
meeting you
here.
again while I'm here. And Richie and I are trying to do some better quality interviews, so maybe we'll find a way, because I'm stuck here for a while. But
Yeah,
I'm so honored you came on. It's been a fantastic
I am too.
conversation.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
No worries. We're going out with The Lucky Country. This is a song
Okay.
written by music by AI, but poetry by me. So here we are, and we will see you. George Keswick will be back tomorrow, and then Mark Batts. But take care, Doctor. Thanks so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing
Bye for now.
brilliant thoughts and brain with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
When I met Jesus Christ, he was almost 10 years old, and he was helping his mother push a trolley full of all they owned. And because they couldn't find an inn they could get in, they were heading to the city and leaving Bethlehem. Couldn't you perform a miracle? I'm out of them, he said. I tried turning nothing into warmth, but it just made my mother cry. It just made my mother cry. Mary Magdalene has become a man, and tonight he's old, and she has been riding my tram. Now it's late and she's trying to sleep beneath a poster for a bank. Your dreams are important to us as it bathes her face in gold. Come give us your natural gifts, we make a wife from toil. Come pretend for history's page we're advancing Australia fair. Let's pretend that we're all advancing Australia fair. Back down the road I found the church we built on the black man's bones was empty, and out the front a sign read all but sold. A sign read all but sold. And we all owe so much money, but to whom we're not quite sure. So head down